And good evening. Welcome to Top Story. We begin tonight with that continued standoff between Russia and Ukraine. Despite diplomatic efforts from the U.S. and its allies, this new video showing more American soldiers arriving in Poland, part of the 1,700 U.S. service members deployed to Eastern Europe as Russia's military continues to surround Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron meeting with Ukraine's president today in Kiev, just 24 hours after a high-stakes sit-down with Vladimir Putin. Macron saying he and Putin made progress towards de-escalation, a claim the Kremlin immediately rejected, with Russian officials also undercutting the French leader's authority to broker that kind of agreement. Meanwhile, inside Ukraine, the country working to restore Soviet-era tanks as it prepares to potentially face Russia's mighty force. Richard Engel is there again and leads us off tonight.
Possible positive signs from French President Macron's marathon diplomacy, meeting for 5 hours with President Putin. Today, Macron arrived in Ukraine, meeting President Zelensky and sounding optimistic, saying Putin had told him he won't be initiating an escalation of the crisis, and that Russia will pull its forces out of Belarus soon, though the Kremlin says no deals were made. A breakthrough? Maybe. But according to the Pentagon, Russian troops are still increasing on Ukraine's borders, especially now in Crimea in the south. Intelligence estimates? Ukrainian forces would fight back, but likely have to go underground within days of an invasion to form a resistance. NBC's Matt Bradley is with Ukrainian forces who are urgently preparing.
Ukraine is littered with these old Soviet-era tanks, and the idea here is to refurbish them and turn them into sparkling new, sophisticated weapons of war.
Military and intelligence officials tell NBC News Russia is expected to have enough force in place to invade all of Ukraine in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
But, Tom, it may not go that far. While the maximalist option is always there, that Putin could invade Ukraine, topple the government, put a more pro-Russian government in place, there is also a key vote in the Russian parliament coming up, a vote on recognizing an area in Ukraine controlled by Russian-backed separatists. So Putin could decide to use that vote to justify taking over a part of this country he already controls. Tom?
Richard Engel leading us off tonight on Top Story from the Eastern Front there in Ukraine. Richard, thank you. As Macron tries to mediate between Russia and Ukraine, the Kremlin is downplaying reports that the French president got assurances against an invasion. I want to bring in NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Andrea Mitchell. And Andrea, I wanted to have you on tonight because you've been traveling with Secretary of State Antony Blinken during this Ukrainian crisis. And I want to get your take on Macron, right? He meets with Putin. He leaves the Kremlin. There's some reporting coming out that Russia has agreed to de-escalation, and then very quickly the Russians say, "Niet, no," right? That is definitely not what happened. Do you think Macron is making things better or worse?
Well, he's not making things worse for the situation, because the situation is really not going to be decided by the French president, by this diplomacy. The situation is now really boiling down to NATO versus Putin and the U.S. versus Putin, with the agreement of the allies. But what Macron has done is undercut his own desires, really, to be the leader of Europe, to replace Angela Merkel and Germany, for France to have the place that he believes is the rightful place. He's in a re-election year, and that really is a dominating factor to all of what's going on here. And the fact is, he's been embarrassed by this, because he goes to Moscow, they meet for 5 hours, they have a news conference after midnight, and he then tells reporters on his plane that they discussed a Finland option. A Finland option is a Cold War term, Finlandization, for somehow Ukraine agreeing to be like Finland and to never agree to join NATO and to always be a neutral partner and actually be under Moscow's influence. That is exactly what Vladimir Putin wanted. So immediately the French say, no, no, he didn't say that. He denies that he ever said that. The allies are all, concerned and a little bit miffed. So he certainly has not made things better for the situation, and he has not made things better for Emmanuel Macron.
Andrea, what does your gut tell you at this point with all of those Russian troops assembled there on the border? I've said it before on this show, Putin doesn't really have the brand of peacemaker. Do you think there's any diplomatic solution to this?
I think there could be a diplomatic solution if they come out with some exit strategy for him. But frankly, most of the really smart analysis and what is being told to Capitol Hill by the intelligence experts, by the Secretary of State, by the Secretary of Defense, is that with so many troops amassed on 3 sides, plus ships at sea, he really has to do something. He can't do some small incursion coupled with perhaps another cyber attack on Kyiv. He's got these troops in Belarus. They're only, 50 miles from Kyiv, right down the highway, even if we get into March and the ground is thawed. Those tanks can move down the major highway right from where they are positioned now in Belarus to the north. It's so close to the capital. He most likely will do something, and the best thinking is, especially considering the weather, that it's sometime around maybe the 18th to 20th of February, the latter part of February, but that we are in for some real trouble.
All right, Andrea Mitchell for us tonight. Andrea, thank you for that. We want to turn now to the pandemic. A lot of breaking news tonight and growing concerns over the slowing production of Johnson & Johnson's COVID vaccine offered around the world as new infections, hospitalizations, and ICU admissions are easing dramatically in some of the hardest hit regions in the U.S. NBC's Miguel Almaguer has more.
Tonight reports a critical supplier of COVID vaccines to much of the developing world, Johnson & Johnson, has quietly shut down production at a plant overseas. Amid growing concern, the virus will continue to mutate, especially if developing countries don't have quick access to the vaccine. J&J says it continues to manufacture its vaccine around the clock and around the world. It all comes as Omicron's subvariant BA2, even more transmissible than the original highly contagious mutation, now accounts for nearly 4% of new cases in the U.S.
Even if the United States is highly vaccinated, but other countries remain unvaccinated, that adds to variants that can accumulate, cause us to have surges.
But tonight a turning point for the U.S., where cases are down 65%. Several states announcing a plan to end mask mandates. Among them, California, where effective a week from today, mandates for the vaccinated will be lifted, though counties like Los Angeles and San Francisco say masks will still be required, as they are on public transportation statewide and in schools K through 12.
Given the increase in population immunity, it makes sense.
Tonight, our nation facing a new stage of the pandemic.
Masks will still be required here in Los Angeles on Sunday for the Super Bowl, though in previous games, fans have widely ignored the regulations. Tom?
All right, Miguel Almaguer for us tonight. Miguel, we thank you for that. And now for more on that major news from Johnson & Johnson and some other breaking news that is just coming in tonight here to Top Story. We want to get to one of our medical experts that we talked to throughout the broadcast and over several different weeks here, Dr. Patel, an NBC News medical contributor. So, Dr. Patel, I want to start with this breaking news. The New York Times has this right now. I'm going to read you from their website. It says that the governor will drop New York's indoor mask mandate on Wednesday. This, of course, follows the news we just heard there from Miguel on California. I understand you've heard this as well. What more reporting do you have on this?
Yeah, so what we understand is that, like the governors around her, New Jersey and Connecticut, I think Governor Hochul was really, I hate to say pressured, because the numbers are coming down, Tom, but the red states are red everywhere in terms of high transmission. So I do think that she's trying to balance what the really fatigued public is telling her. Listen, rates are low, we're doing what we can, things are coming down. But, we're still seeing cases out here. And actually, our daily cases are equivalent to what we saw in the peak of Delta. So not as bad as it was a couple of weeks ago, but certainly we're not in the clear yet. So I think people will need to exhibit caution.
Dr. Patel, I want to go back to that other big news about Johnson & Johnson. How do you interpret that move? Does that tell us more about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, or does it tell us more about the pandemic?
More about the pandemic, Tom. It's disappointing because, as we pointed out in talking with Miguel, this is a global race to try to get as many people vaccinated. Johnson & Johnson is an important part of that. One shot even if you needed 2 shots, you don't need all those complex refrigerators. It has an easier distribution mechanism, more likely. I think that shutting down that plant, barring any safety issues, which I don't believe there were, this signals that they just are not able to prioritize a larger manufacturing capacity. And this also tells you that they probably, as a company, have not prioritized this at the same level that Pfizer and some of their competitors have. So even though some might say, oh, it's a signal that, you know, the pandemic's ending, we don't need as much of this manufacturing, quite the opposite, especially with the need for boosters. We haven't even gotten first-round shots in much of the world. Think about what we need to do to get boosters and what we know is coming down the line for all these other countries, just like we've experienced.
Dr. Patel, I know we have to be cautious, and I appreciate your take on that and reminding our viewers. But if we kind of put all these things together, right, at least in this moment in time right now, and as we've learned with this pandemic, things can always change over a course of a couple of days. But you have J&J stopping manufacturing of their vaccine. You have states like California and New York getting rid of their mask mandates. As you mentioned, cases coming down in many parts of the country. Are we at a sort of an inflection point here with the pandemic?
We are. And so let me give some good news. I rarely get to do this. We're at an inflection point where we can talk about many things going away. I've been working with schools and public schools trying to tell them, here's when we can get rid of masks potentially. Here's when it's safe to do certain things, or eliminating quarantine if there's a positive case, Tom. That's good news. What I think people like myself and other public health people need to do is think about what are the metrics, Tom, where we switch it back on. Because as you know, really hard when we get back to closer to normal to tell people, listen, we're worried, let's go back. And that's, I think, something that we should be thinking about now. And I'm hoping all these governors are thinking about that as well.
It is a good reminder. Omicron definitely took a lot of us by surprise. All right, Dr. Patel, we always thank you for your analysis. We want to move on now, though. We've been telling you over the past couple of days about this massive trucker protest over vaccine mandates and COVID restrictions in Ottawa, Canada. The police chief saying the city is under siege right now. Officials now worried things could grow violent. And those protests now having consequences across the border in the U.S., shutting down the busiest border crossing in North America. Our Ellison Barber has this report from Ottawa tonight.
Tonight, Canada's Freedom Convoy protest is impacting international trade, leaving truck traffic in Detroit at a standstill overnight.
We got to grin and bear it, right? You know, there's just, can't get upset. I'm not the only guy stuck out here.
The cause of this disruption? Protesters blockading part of the Ambassador Bridge, a vital link carrying 27% of all trade between the U.S. and Canada.
You know, I can understand people fighting for certain rights, but the way they're going about it, doing this is not going to solve anything.
This blockade just the latest move from a group led by truckers that have occupied streets crippling Canada's capital city, protesting vaccine mandates and COVID restrictions.
Today in Ottawa, there are still countless protesters, trucks all along the streets throughout the city. Everywhere you look, almost, you can see the trucks that kind of just continue to go. Over there, sort of more in the front of Parliament, is one of kind of the main gathering areas where we've seen people come and gather. You can see more of the cars, the people here. For the most part, things have been calm. You can hear some people shouting freedom at us now.
That protest now in its 12th day. For the first 11 days, horns blared. Now, because of a court injunction, they're revving their engines instead. But one thing has stayed the same: immovable vehicles bringing the city to a standstill.
All the truckers here are sitting in their trucks. And as far as I'm concerned, it's up to the population now. You want your country back, here is your opportunity.
A new poll from Abacus Data shows that 67% of Ottawa residents say they strongly oppose the protests.
I guess both sides have to talk. I think the idea of a mediator is a great idea, because they are completely at a stalemate right now.
Ottawa police say they've arrested 23 people and issued some 1,300 tickets since the protest began.
Many of the remaining demonstrators are highly determined and volatile.
But on the ground, protesters say it's not like that.
It's unbelievable. Like you sit here and you talk to people and everybody's in tears. You give each other hugs.
All right, Ellison Barber joins us now live from the protest right there in Ottawa tonight. Ellison, I have a couple of questions for you. I want to start off with, are the truckers living in those trucks, or have they abandoned them there in the roads?
So some of them are. If you walk with me, you can see a little bit here. A lot of them are idling and on. Many of them are sleeping in their trucks. There are some areas, some places where people have set up sort of encampments where there are some tents. Some people are coming to their trucks during the day and then staying in other locations. But to your question, yes, there are people, as you can see right here, that are staying in their trucks. And when we were out this morning walking around, we could see people inside where they were sleeping, staying overnight as well.
Ellison, where you are, looks like this protest is still very much in full force. Is there any end in sight to this?
It doesn't appear to be in terms of the Ambassador Bridge earlier today, and I'll keep walking just so you can see a little more of what we see. Windsor Police, they say that they were able to open the Ambassador Bridge back up at least to some traffic here in Ottawa. The city manager has said that he's having difficulty convincing or getting any tow trucks to come in and move some of these vehicles out of the way. As we've been speaking to protesters here, they tell us that they plan to stay put until they see all COVID mandates end. They say no mask mandates, no vaccine mandates, no indoor dining restrictions. Until that all goes away, they say they are prepared to stay here for days or even months. And we have seen people with food, with supplies, things where they say that if they feel they need to, if they don't see the changes, the demands they want to see met, that they can stay out here until they see something change. And one person we spoke to today, he said he's prepared to stay weeks or even months. Tom?
All right, back now with the subject of a new hit Netflix documentary you may have seen. He's the man known as the Tinder Swindler. He's accused of defrauding dozens of women he met on the dating app, taking them on lavish vacations before scamming them out of millions of dollars. Several dating apps now banning him from their platforms, and it comes as cases of romance scams are rising across the country, costing their victims hundreds of millions during the pandemic. Priscilla Thompson has more.
Tonight, the man dubbed the Tinder Swindler banned from the app and other dating sites. This comes after Simon Levi allegedly scammed women out of millions.
We had a special connection. It felt like stepping into a movie.
And after Netflix released The Tinder Swindler, a true crime documentary profiling 3 women who say they were victims.
$20,000, $30,000, $140,000.
The film, now in the top 5 on Netflix, alleges Levi, also known as Shimon Hayut, would match with women on Tinder, tell them he was a billionaire's son, and take them on extravagant trips, then con the women into giving him money that he would never repay. Levi allegedly scammed dozens of women out of around $10 million, filmmakers say. These women are not alone. Romance scams have skyrocketed during the pandemic. According to the Federal Trade Commission, U.S. losses doubling in 2020 from the previous year, a record $304 million. Romance scams now outpacing all other fraud.
How big of a problem is this?
It's a tremendous problem. Romance scams have been growing over the past few years at a really alarming rate. In the first 9 months of 2021, again, we saw a huge increase.
Tinder now releasing user tips for protecting against romance scams, including being wary of dates who ask for personal information and those who emphasize their financial challenges.
The women in the film, they don't blame Tinder. They blame Simon. Ultimately, they met Simon online, yes, but actually the real swindle happened when they met him in real life.
Levi, a convicted con man, went to prison for 2 years in 2015 for defrauding women in Finland, and again in 2019, serving 5 months for fraud in Israel before being released. His current whereabouts are unknown. According to the documentary, Levi started a website offering business advice and had even been seen back on Tinder. A spokeswoman for the dating app telling NBC News, "We banned Simon Levi and any of his known aliases as soon as the story of his actions became public in 2019. Adding, "We conducted additional internal investigations and can confirm Simon Levi is not active on Tinder under any of his known aliases." The film's director with this word of caution when finding love online.
That's how most people meet, the people that they fall in love with these days. But I think, obviously there needs to be a sort of a healthy level of skepticism.
What can people do to avoid being a victim?
Never send money to someone you haven't met in person. Never transfer money or invest your money on the encouragement of someone you haven't met in person.
All right, Priscilla Thompson joins us now live on set. And Priscilla, we were just talking about this, and you were telling me these women are in serious debt now, and they're trying to get some of the money back?
Right. They're still working to pay off all of that money that they lent Live-I. And after the documentary premiered, they actually started a GoFundMe. They've raised more than $49,000, and in all, they're hoping to raise about $685,000.
And in your story, you know, we saw all those sort of social media pics. He's in these really nice cars. He's got the suits, the watches. It was all apparently a scam?
Apparently he was taking these women on very lavish vacations and trips and then began asking them for money.
Okay, Priscilla Thompson, thanks so much for that. When we come back, hail the hero, the crossing guard, caught on camera using her own body to shield another child from an oncoming car. You see it right there, the major honor for her today. And the Wild West of weed. Several states known for crops now growing cannabis. What's behind the sudden boom right now? That's next. All right, we are back now with Top Stories news feed. The 17-year-old cousin of Amir Locke has been arrested in connection to the no-knock warrant that led to his death. Locke was shot and killed inside a Minneapolis apartment building last week. The officers were serving a warrant that was related to a homicide in St. Paul, but Locke was not named on that document. All right, 2 California police officers were injured after a hospital patient stole a police car and crashed into another. Cell phone video shows the stolen San Jose patrol car going around in circles before it rams into another patrol SUV. Officers were responding to an unruly patient at the hospital when he took off on foot and fled in the idle police car. He's now facing several felony charges. And the husband of Vice President Kamala Harris was evacuated from a high school in Washington, D.C. Secret Service agents quickly removing second gentleman Doug Emhoff from a Black History Month event after the school received a bomb threat. Students and staff also evacuated. Authorities were searching the school, but no explosive was found. Now to a wild story. A New York couple has been charged in an alleged $4.5 billion crypto scheme. Federal prosecutors accuse the husband and wife of laundering the proceeds of nearly 120,000 Bitcoin that were stolen during a hack of a cryptocurrency exchange in 2016. The Justice Department says it has seized $3.6 billion of those funds, believed to be the department's largest financial seizure ever. And a special honor for a Maryland crossing guard who saved a student from an oncoming car. You may have seen this video. The surveillance video shows Annette Goodyear pushing a child out of harm's way, throwing herself into the car's path. She was hit, but she is okay. Today, Maryland's governor, Larry Hogan, awarded Goodyear, who is also a police officer, with a governor's citation for her heroism. All right, now we want to go to the major corporate shakeup at Peloton. The company announcing that its CEO is stepping down and 2,800 employees have been laid off. The at-home exercise giant struggling with decreased demand after peaking earlier in the pandemic. NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa has the details.
Y'all look good. Y'all look focused today.
A shakeup at Peloton. Now taking the reins, former CFO of Spotify and Netflix, Barry McCarthy. He's replacing Peloton's co-founder, John Foley, who helped grow the company's following to more than 6.5 million members.
Peloton was one of the hottest stay-at-home stocks of 2020.
What's up?
When sales surged early in the pandemic, Peloton reached a value of almost $50 billion. But the fitness company has struggled to maintain its momentum. Peloton's value is down 75% from its peak last year.
Why has the past year been so tumultuous for Peloton? Everyone was rushing to buy a bike or a treadmill because they could no longer access the gym with pandemic-related restrictions, so that growth wasn't going to last forever.
Peloton's image also taking a hit when television shows depicted characters suffering heart attacks after riding the company's bike. John! Outgoing CEO Foley calls it a humbling time and introduced a plan that will slash $800 million in annual costs. That includes cutting 2,800 employees and abandoning plans for the company's first factory. But among the sweeping changes, a glimmer of hope. Peloton stock up 25% today, even as experts say the chance for a buyout from a company like Amazon or Nike is waning.
I think today you're seeing the company really lay the groundwork for its own turnaround.
All right, Emily joins us now outside of Peloton headquarters right here in New York City. So, Emily, people who have Peloton bikes or treadmills or who use the apps, you know, they really love those instructors and some of the content. Will any of these sort of layoffs affect those staffers or the programs that people follow every day?
Well, Well, Tom, Peloton members can breathe easy tonight. The company says there will be no changes to its roster of instructors or programming content. Tom?
All right, Emily Aketa for us tonight. Emily, we appreciate that. Next tonight to the Heartland, where we have an inside look at a cash crop that's rewriting the rules in real time. The lucrative marijuana industry has already exploded in places like California and Colorado, but now new opportunities are causing a free market frenzy in Oklahoma. NBC's Morgan Chesky is there as farmers look to cash in and officials try to keep up.
It's not the kind of well-oiled machine you'd expect to see in Oklahoma. But make no mistake, folks here know a boom when they see one.
We're in one of the reddest states in the country, standing in a room full of marijuana.
Unbelievable. No one thought we would be here even 3 years ago, right?
Including David Lewis, who left a job in staffing to form Stability Cannabis. Now, 3 years after the state legalized medical marijuana, more than 100 employees make sure their supply meets the surging demand. All it took to start? $2,500 for a license to grow with no cap on quantity.
So about how many plants in this one room alone?
About 3,000 cannabis plants in just this one room.
And you'll have this on a store shelf how soon?
In just about 90 days.
Their customers, around 400,000 Oklahomans with medical marijuana cards, who can buy any cannabis product legally sold within state lines. Oklahoma now home to more than 2,000 marijuana dispensaries, more than Colorado, Oregon, even California. The draw? Ease of access and fewer regulations than competing states.
We're witnessing the second Wild Wild West to California.
Which is exactly why best friends Dustin Hyman and Django Evans traded California for Oklahoma to open their own shop.
Who are your customers?
It's anyone from a school teacher to an ex-athlete to a corporate guy to an 80-year-old grandma.
But the new green rush, not so cut and dry. The state agency tasked with regulating is struggling, telling us they've only been able to inspect about a quarter of the more than 9,000 licensed farms.
We have not been able to keep up with the demand.
Demand so high, quiet farm towns are finding this cash crop comes at a cost.
We're hearing a lot of stories in rural Oklahoma about the water resources overtaxed and overused, along with an immense uptick in the use of their electric grids.
With Oklahoma cannabis on track this year to surpass $1 billion in retail sales, lawmakers are proposing tighter rules and higher taxes. But with a business model other states are no doubt watching, it's clear this boom's taken root. Morgan Chesky, NBC News, Oklahoma City.
All right, now to the Americas. Headlines from the U.S. and across Latin America. And we begin with two very sad headlines, starting with a deadly bus crash in Mexico. At least 8 people killed, including a child, after the bus collided with a truck on a highway in Cancun and overturned. Dozens more injured, including tourists from France, Germany, and Pakistan. And in Colombia, a landslide has left more than a dozen people dead. Heavy rains causing the slide that swept through a residential area in the central part of the country. Mud and debris covering homes. Crews now searching for any survivors. At least 60 other homes have been evacuated. And we are back with the Academy Awards. The 2022 Oscar nominations have been announced. This year, 10 movies are vying for the award of Best Picture. Here they are. And the movie The Power of the Dog leads the nominations with 12, followed by Dune with 10, West Side Story and Belfast, each with 7 nominations. Let's bring in a top story favorite, a man who knows how to give an acceptance speech, a man who can light a fire, entertainment journalist Brian Balthazar. Brian, first, I love the scene behind you there. You've really set the tone with that.
Thank you very much. It's just a glass of scotch after this is over for me.
So, Brian, I got to ask you, there's 10 movies? That seems like so many. How does the Academy decide who wins?
Okay, right, exactly. Well, 10 is a lot. You know, it coincided, this announcement that there would be 10 nominees, with the announcement that there would be some initiatives to foster more inclusion and representation, and some criticism that a lot of good movies were being overlooked. And yes, you know, there's a lot of movies to watch. I got some of them right here. You know, they give you the DVDs, and you can also go to the Oscar screening room, and each distributor pays $12,500 for the ability for people, voters, to screen those movies. The good news this year is, though, that there are 10 great movies. So at the end of the day, really, the bottom line is that the one that gets the most votes wins, unless there's a tie and then there's two. But so really, I think it does introduce people to more choices and get people to see what kind of great films are out there.
You know, we just got our shipment of DVDs in at the Llamas household, so we're burning through those every single day. You know, anytime these nominations come out, people always talk about the drama, the snubs, the surprises. What are the big ones this year?
Well, you know, internet viewers love that kind of who got snubbed because they're celebrities. They get everything they want, right? Well, this year, one of the biggest snubs was Lady Gaga in the Best Actress category, of course, for The House of Gucci. She was nominated for a BAFTA award, the UK's equivalent of the Oscars, and she got that. So it was kind of thought that she might be a shoo-in, but did not get one. Kristen Stewart, however, who was nominated for Diana when she played Princess Diana, it's interesting that she did get nominated in this, but didn't get nominated for the BAFTAs. I'm not actually surprised because the UK might have a harsher eye towards her playing Princess Diana. So that's interesting.
Brian, give me the hot take. Give me the Balthazar hot take on Lady Gaga in House of Gucci, because I thought she was great.
I did too. You know, it's interesting. I am fascinated by people playing real people. And honestly, the Best Actress category was all about that this year. The majority of the women nominated, Jessica Chastain playing Tammy Faye. We had Nicole Kidman playing Lucille Ball. I thought I'm a Lady Gaga fan, so I go in with kind of a little bit of a slight bias of like she's going to be good, and I was not disappointed here. So, but you have to be objective with your voter. So
you do. No, you do. You really do. There's going to be some history made, possibly.
Yes, well, already Denzel Washington is the most nominated black actor in history. He was just nominated for The Tragedy of Macbeth, and Jane Campion is the first female director to be nominated twice. She was first nominated for Best Director in 1994 for The Piano, and she's nominated now for The Power of the Dog. So it's always good to have the things to celebrate, and those two are celebrating today.
Here on Top Story, we have done probably more stories on Encanto than any other news broadcast, maybe in the world. What is the buzz?
Why do you think? Is it do you have kids? Maybe?
We have kids, yes, and we've been brainwashed by that great music. So, Brian, what's the hot take on that? Do we think Lin-Manuel's going to win?
Well, not only may he win, he may actually become an EGOT because of it. So he's nominated for the song Dos Oregoitas. I'm sorry, I butchered that pronunciation. I hope you could probably correct me on that. But the interesting part is he's already got the Emmy, the Grammy, the Tony. This could be his Oscar chance. He's been nominated before and didn't win. The interesting thing is the hot song is We Don't Talk About
Bruno.
Gino.
Everybody loves that one.
Watched it for the second time last night. We Don't Talk About Bruno is the one that's getting like commercial success.
Yeah.
But this is the one Disney only submitted one song for consideration, and this is the one that they could put forth. And I think he's going to get it. It's a beautiful song.
I hope so too. I really hope he wins. And there's a lot of other great songs on that album as well that haven't even been released yet that are wonderful. Finally, Brian, I just want to ask you about this because I could be completely off, but I want to get your take on this. It seems to me that this year, at least people that I've been talking to are talking more about compelling television shows than they were talking about compelling films. Am I wrong to say that the latest buzz has been around really big TV shows?
Oh, you're absolutely right. And the interesting thing is, we're looking for something that's going to draw us in for more than 2 hours. We're spending a lot of time at home, right? And so, interestingly, there was a time when actors and actresses would not touch television. Television was not where it's at. But then a lot of great screenwriters, because they weren't writing the blockbusters, decided to write for television. And that's where the business was for them. And now everyone wants a piece of television. That's where you can tell really compelling stories that unfold over years. And so, yes, television is where it's at. Streaming is where it's at. It's not a bad time to be a movie star. I'm not, it's not the best time. But, listen, I'm not worried about them. But TV is absolutely where it's at.
Thank you so much for watching Top Story. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. I'll see you right back here, actually, from Los Angeles tomorrow. We'll tell you more about that. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.